to the Crochet Magical Mystery Tour. My name is Chris of Light and Joy Designs, and today we are going to be learning week 3 of the Tunisian Squares Series. In week 1 we learned the Tunisian Waves Square. In week 2 we learned the Tunisian Block or Tunisian Tile Square. And this week we're going to be learning the Tunisian Fancy Square. This is a lace pattern in Tunisian crochet, and it's pretty easy, and I'm going to walk you through it step by step. Even if you're a beginner, you will have no problem with learning this. Now, before we get started on the materials you will need, I just want to point out to you that at the end of this Tunisian Squares series, you will have learned several different squares that you will be able to use in a couple of different modular patterns, which means you'll be able to take these squares and put them into different configurations to make things like a blanket, a scarf, or a poncho. And that's kind of the fun of this, is that at the end you'll be able to make something cool with these. In addition to that, you could take any one of these patterns and make your own pattern, make your own design, whether that be a shawl or a wrap or a sweater. So let's take a look at the materials. So before we get started, if you're excited to learn to make the fancy Tunisian square, please give this video a thumbs up before we get started, and please also consider subscribing, because each week I will be coming out with a new Tunisian square in the Tunisian Square series, as well as other patterns in the Crochet Magical Mystery Tour, which is a year-long crochet along, where I present free patterns to you and video tutorials each week. All right, let's get started. So for this pattern, you will need 2 colors of yarn. I'm using Lily's Sugar and Cream, one in a solid, the white color, and then a color changing color called Country Stripes, and that's what gives the different colored look in each of these squares that I'm making. And as I mentioned in the other videos, I suggest that you, if you're going to make all of these squares and use them in a modular project, that you might also want to consider getting some additional colors. Like, let's say you choose the Country Stripes, you might also want to choose 2 other colors that when we make 3-color projects, you'll have colors that match up with the Country Stripes. And here I have another Lily's Sugar and Cream, and this one is called Aloe Vera, and this one is Red Heart Scrubby Smoothie, and I don't know the name of it, but you can look it up and you'll see it there. So beyond the yarn, I'm going to be using a 6.0 millimeter Tunisian crochet hook. You can certainly use a regular crochet hook for these squares and just put a rubber band on the end. You'll need a Tunisian hook that's has a straight shaft, as opposed to the kind that have like a handle on them. The squares that I'm making are each 6 inches square, 6 inches each way, and so you may need to adjust up or down a 0.5 millimeter in size to either 6.5 or 5.5 to get your gauge right. The only time it will matter, as long as your squares are all the same size, you'll be able to make any of the modular projects. However, if your squares are more or less than 6 inches square, your final measurements on whichever project you choose will be different from the measurements that are in those modular patterns. You'll also want to have a scissors a yarn needle for sewing in the ends, and of course a measuring tape for checking your gauge. Okay, so for this pattern, let's take a look at the chart. We're going to chain 22 stitches, and then we are going to pick up a stitch starting in the second chain from the hook and every chain thereafter, and that will give us a total of 22 loops on our hook. Let me show you how to do that. Okay, we're going to make a slip knot. Just cross it over and pull a loop through that loop. There's lots of ways to make slip stitches, but that's just how I make them. And now we're going to chain 22. To make a chain, if you're very brand new, you're just going to yarn over and pull through that loop on your hook and continue until you have a total of 22 chains. You can see here I have 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, and this loop on my hook does not count as one of the chains. So go until you have 22. So I have 22 chains, and this pattern is made with the starting is any multiple of 2. So any even number will work. But if you're making it along with the size that I'm making, that's why we're doing 22 stitches. So each of these chains has 3 threads in it. You have the V's in the front, and on the back you have these little back bumps. We're going to be working into the back bump of this second chain, and when you work into the back bump, what that does is it gives you a nice finished edge. I'll show you what that looks like. You have this nice finished edge. So we go into that second chain from the hook, and we're just going to yarn over and pull up a loop. The loop that we started with on our hook corresponded to that very first chain. That's why we didn't go into the first chain. And then we just go into the back bump of each chain thereafter, and you're going to do that all the way down to the end. If you're new to Tunisian crochet, as you're doing this first row, it might feel a little fiddly, a little loosey-goosey, and if you've done any crocheting at all, you'll know that a lot of times that's how most projects feel in the beginning. And if you're new to Tunisian crochet, you're going to start having the loops underneath your hand, and that might feel a little weird at first as well, but don't worry about that. Just keep going. You might have to just pull up that little back bump to get in there. But just keep going all the way to the end. And let's see, we're almost there now. All right, so we are at the end of our forward pass of the very first, or the foundational row. And with Tunisian crochet, every row has 2 passes. One that goes forward, the forward pass, where we add on the loops, and then the second pass is the return pass, where we work the loops off. And since we're working in 2-color Tunisian crochet, sometimes you change color at the right hand side, which is what we were doing with the last 2 squares that we worked with. But this square, we're going to be changing our color at the left hand side. So let's take a look at that on the chart. All right, so this was our row 1, and you see I've added these little tildes. It looks like this, and that what that represents is a return pass stitch, and I'm going to show you how to do that. And since we're doing it in a different color, I have it here in color B in the green, and I'm going to show you how to add in the yarn right now. So once we finish that, that will be done with row 1. And then for row 2, we are going to pick up, we're going to continue with our color B, and we'll work the forward pass of row 2. So let me show you the return pass first. All right, so when we're adding a second color for our return pass, what we're going to do is we're going to make a slip knot. And we're just going to put that on the end of our hook and pull it to the size of the hook. And for the return pass, the way that a normal return pass goes is you yarn over and pull through one loop of your forward pass. And then you yarn over and pull through 2 loops all the way back until you have just 1 loop left on your hook. So this slip stitch, this loop that we've put on here, that's going to be our yarn over, pull through 1, okay? And that's going to make our edge stitch. Now, usually the edge stitch has 3 loops on it, and this slip stitch here is going to make up that edge stitch, and we'll see it when we come back on the next forward pass. All right, so we're going to take the working end of this, and again, it'll feel a little loose and stuff. Don't worry about that. It'll all work out fine. You see this, this tail end is going to end up making up part of our edge stitch. And this loop here will make the first stitch in our horizontal chain of our return pass. So now what we're going to do is we're going to do yarn over, pull through 1, 2 loops. We're just going to repeat that over and over. Yarn over, pull through 2 loops. Yarn over, pull through 2 loops, all the way back to the end. And as you're first learning this, just focus on getting your stitches uniform. You want this return pass to not be too tight and not be too loose, because that's going to affect whether your piece is rippled or really constricted. You want that Goldilocks, just the right size of the chain. These are essentially chains. Yarn over, pull through 2. We still have 2 left. That means we have to do 1 more, and we are done with our reverse pass of row 2. Okay, so for the forward pass of row 2, we're going to start off with something called an extended single crochet, and it's just a fancy way. That first loop on our hook is going to be our first stitch. So this place where we left off with that loop, that is our first stitch. And what we want to do is to extend it, we're just going to chain 1. Pretty simple. And that's called a TESS, or Tunisian Extended Simple Stitch. Then what we're going to do is we're going to do this fancy little thing where we are going to take these 2 vertical bars. We're going to go under both of them at the same time, and we're going to do 1 Tunisian double crochet. And then we're going to go back into those same 2 vertical bars and do a second Tunisian double crochet. And we're just going to do that all the way across. And this chart probably makes it look harder than it is. It's very, very easy. So we just come all the way back And then in the last stitch, we're going to do the same thing as we did in the beginning. We're going to make an extended simple crochet into our edge stitch. So it's just that edge stitch plus a chain. All right, and what that does is it brings it up to the height of the double crochets. And then our return pass is going to be back in color A. So the return pass will come back in color A all the way to the end. All right, so we're ready to begin our forward pass of row 2. And in case it wasn't obvious, you don't cut the yarn. We don't need to cut our yarn at all for this pattern. We're able to just pick it up at the either ends. Okay, so we have our first loop on the hook. That's essentially a single a Tunisian simple stitch, but we want to make it extended, so we're just going to chain 1. And now we're going to start in the second and third vertical bars, and we're going to be doing double crochet. So we're going to do Tunisian double crochet. So we're going to yarn over, we're going to go under 1, 2 bars. So we're doing those 2 together. We yarn over, pull up a loop, and then we yarn over, pull through 2. And then we're just going to repeat that into those same 2 stitches. So we have 2 Tunisian double crochets together into 2 stitches. Let's do that again. So we're going to yarn over, go into the next 2 vertical bars, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2. That's 1 Tunisian double crochet. Then we're going to do a second one in the same 2 stitches. And you'll just work like that all the way across to the end. Two regular stitches left and our end stitch. So let's do 2 double crochets into these 2 stitches. That's 1 and 2. Now let's take a look at our edge stitch. So the edge stitch is always comprised of 3 strands. There's always the inner strand right here under my thumb, and then there's these 2 outer threads. And because we changed our yarn, the tail of color B makes up one of those outer threads. So when we get to the next row, you'll be able to see it a little clearer. But basically we're just going to go, on top of this inner thread and under the 2 outer threads. So we're going to go under there. We're going to yarn over and pull up a loop. That's like a Tunisian simple stitch. And to make it into an extended stitch, what we're going to do is we're going to chain 1. And what that does is it just brings it up to the height of all of our double crochets. So now we're ready to begin our return pass, and that's going to happen with our color A. Now I'm going to just close up this loop here before I start my return pass, and the reason is so that these loops are the same as these white bars here. Okay, so just gonna close that up, not too tight, and then we're going to do our return pass, which is we start with a yarn over and pull through 1. And I'm also going to just close up this loop here. It might come loosened again, but we'll fix it on the other end. So that was our yarn over pull through 1, which is essentially like making a chain 1. And then we're going to yarn over pull through 2. And we're just going to do yarn over pull through 2 all the way back to the beginning of where we started, row 2. And again, just make sure that each of these stitches is the same size. So even as, like, you know, these stitches may become farther apart as you're doing them, just make sure that your chain that you're creating right here is the same size. See these white chains? Make sure they're all the same size. And you'll very quickly get the hang of that. You just kind of adjust your work. I kind of, as I'm pulling through, I just kind of go like that. And that brings these 2 loops together so that the yarn's coming through together. There we go. And now we've completed row 2 of our fancy square. So now let's take a look at row 3. For row 3, we're going to continue in color A, which I have here as red, but for me, I'm working in white. So this is an easy row. Row 3 just is going to start with the Tunisian simple stitch, and we're going to work a Tunisian simple stitch in every stitch along our work. And I will demonstrate that to you. This is a nice easy row. And then when we work our reverse pass, we're going to change to color B to work our reverse pass all the way to the end. So to work Tunisian simple stitch, it's called simple stitch for a reason. It's very, very easy to do. This first loop on our hook is our first stitch, as always. And that corresponds with this first vertical bar. And we're always going to start in our second vertical bar, except for patterns where you're increasing. But we're not doing that in this square. So we're going to make our very first stitch, which is actually our second stitch, because this is our first stitch. We're going to make our second stitch right into that second vertical bar. You go right underneath it from right to left, yarn over, and pull up a loop. It's very simple. And we go under the next vertical bar, yarn over, and pull up a loop. And the important thing with this is making sure that all of these loops are the same height and that they're not too tight and not too loose. And you'll just work that all the way down to the end. And when we get to the end, I will show you how to work that edge stitch again, because the edge stitch is the trickiest part. And once you know what you're looking for, it's not that bad. It becomes easy. And you know, sometimes it's like the work can get kind of flattened out like that, and you're like, where am I? What's going on here? In my case, the blue is my color B. All right, so I can see that I have one regular stitch left and one edge stitch. So I'm going to do a Tunisian simple stitch, which is abbreviated TSS. And then I'm going to come here to my edge stitch. And remember I said that the edge stitch always has 3 threads. We have this inside thread right here, and then we have these 2 outside threads, this blue one and then this white one. So I'm going to go on top of the inside thread and under the 2 outside threads. Then I'm going to yarn over and pull up a loop. That's it. Pretty easy, right? So that's that's row 3 forward pass completed. Now we're going to do our return pass, and we always change our yarn on the left hand side in this pattern. So what we're going to do is we're going to drop our color A, and we're going to pick up our color B, and I'm just going to make sure that that loop is right there is you know, just secured into the right size as all the other loops before I go ahead and start. And then I'm going to, I let the yarn come up to the height of my loops of my current row, and then I'm going to yarn over and pull through 1. I'm also going to grab this yarn and just kind of fix the height on that one, on this one here, this edge stitch. It'll loosen up again, and we'll fix it again when we get back down to it later on when we're doing our next reverse pass. I just like to fix that there. So that was our yarn over, pull through 1, and now we just yarn over, pull through 2 all the way back to the other end. And there we are, row 3 is completed. And this is what it should look like so far. Let's take a look at row 4. Okay, so for row 4, you are just going to repeat row 2. And for row 5, you're going to repeat row 3. So we've done this is the repeat, row 2 and 3. And so we've done it one time. You're going to do this repeat of row 2 and 3 5 more times. So you will have done it a total of 6 times. Plus this foundation row, you'll have 13 rows. Go ahead and do those 2 rows, 2 and 3, 5 more times, and I will meet you at the end and show you how to bind it off and finish your square. I'm going to go over with you the edge stitch just one more time in case you have any questions on it. I'm here at the end of a row 3, and I'm at my edge stitch here. I've done my last regular stitch, and in case it's difficult for you to see, this white stitch here, this chain, is the first chain of our return pass. That means that this chain here is our edge stitch. So I'm just going to snug up that loop just ever so slightly. And as you recall, we're going to go on top of this inner thread and underneath the 2 outer threads, which are comprised of both color A and B. And then we just yarn over and pull up a loop. So I hope that that makes that clear for you on the edge stitch, and it will look the same at the end of either row. That edge stitch will have both colors on the 2 outer threads. So I'll meet you at the end for the bind off. All right, so here we are at the end. You should have 6 of these repeats done. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that would be a total of 12, plus the foundation row is 13 rows. So now I'm going to show you how to bind this off. In Tunisian crochet, we always finish with a bind off on this last edge here. And the reason is because we have these kind of, you can see these holes here, and although this is a lace piece, we still want to close those holes up. And the bind off is very easy. What we do is we just bind off as if to do a Tunisian simple stitch. So we're going to go into the second vertical bar, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then pull that loop through the loop that was on our hook. And with each stitch that we do that, it tightens this up and closes up those little holes underneath the chains of the last return pass. So we just go under each vertical bar, we yarn over, pull up a loop, and then slip stitch it through the loop on our hook. And just do that all the way to the end, and then I'm going to show you how to finish the edges if you choose to do so. Okay, so I'm at my last 2 stitches. This is the last regular stitch, and then this will be our edge stitch. And sometimes, you know, your work will kind of flop down like this, and you wonder, oh, am I at the end or not? You just want to pull that out, and especially with 2-color, you can see it more clearly that this white chain here was the beginning of this return pass, and this blue color here is where our edge stitch is. So I'm doing that second to last one. Now I'm going to do the edge stitch, and again I want to go on top of this inside thread and under the 2 outside threads. I'm going to yarn over and pull through a loop, and now at this stage your piece is done, okay? But if you would like to have the white edging on each side, I'm going to show you what to do with that next. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to slip stitch along this edge with my white, or my color A. And this is where we left off with color B. I'm just going to tighten that up just ever so slightly so that it's the same size as all these other vertical bars. And then I'm going to begin. We can actually cut this now, and we'll sew in those ends later. And I'll show you that as well. So since we have double crochets and then we have Tunisian simple stitches, we're going to have approximately two slip stitches for the double crochets, and we're going to have one where there's the Tunisian simple stitch. So it's you know, kind of more of an art than a science, and I'm just going to let's see here, just going to go into these stitches along the way, find the best spot, and I think what I'll do is I'll just work this, see if I can work this tail in as I go. Yeah, that's not going to work, so I'll have to sew that in later. If I was doing single crochet edging, then I could work that tail in, but I'm not. So you're just going to go all the way down, and I just try to go under at least 2 threads for each stitch. And I try to go into a different space for each stitch. And it's, you know, it's a little bit more of an art than a science. I'm just showing you all of this so that you can, in case you want to see me do the whole thing. And then down to the end. Okay, and then when I get down to the end, I'm just going to yarn over, pull through a loop. I'm going to cut my tail, pull that yarn through, and then I'm going to come on this side. And one other thing I just want to point out to you is in Tunisian crochet, the work will tend to bias towards the right-hand side if you're right-handed, and if you're doing Tunisian crochet left-handed, it will bias the other way. It's because of the way that you're putting the hook in, and because of the return pass, it tends to pull this way. But once you block it, it straightens out just fine. So now I'm going to make an edge on this side. So I'm going to just make a slip knot, and I'm just going to attach it down here at this bottom corner. Chain, and where did my tail go? There it is. I'm just going to pull that tight, and then I'm just going to slip stitch along this edge here. And basically this side is a little bit easier because you'll have distinct places where to go. You'll see that as you're doing it. You'll have the exact chains. Just go into each chain along the side. All the way up to the top. And the last one here. And I'm just going to finish by going into this first one here so that there's no gaps. And then I'll chain one, cut the yarn, and let me show you how to sew these in. So to sew these in, you're just going to get your yarn needle and thread it like so. And then what I do is I just work into the back, these back bumps along the back here. So I'm going to go in the side here. And I'm just going to make sure that where that was coming from looks like it was tightened up properly, that we didn't have any loose and I'm just trying to keep it from going into the front of the work. And then once you've gone a certain distance, and just work your way back. And then we can just cut that. So, well, I'll just sew in the rest of those threads, and this will be complete. So there you have it. This is the one we just made. So if you like this, this is what I call the fancy Tunisian square. Like I said, it would be great for an overall shawl or pillow cover. I mean, there's so many things you could do with this. But at the end of the Tunisian Square Series, I will have a bunch of patterns that you can take these squares and match them all up together and make a blanket or a poncho or scarf, or there'll probably be some other patterns as well. So thank you for joining. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Remember to subscribe also, because I will have another Tunisian square coming out next week, as well as more patterns in the Crochet Magical Mystery Tour. So thank you for joining, and thank you for liking and subscribing, and we'll see you again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.